I love that
So
entry
yes,
to Jabba's court
I,
purely because you've got the droid there stretched out being tortured. That's how every court case should end in Jabba's court.
you haven't got the T-shirt on, have you got the T-shirt?
I've got the I have got the don't know if you can quite see that torturing
Oh yeah,
droids.
control torturer. Okay, Jabba's Court this week. We're looking at whether or not deceased actors should be resurrected for the TV shows and for the films. Now, obviously, this is something that is in the news at the moment because of the ongoing dispute about the use of Peter Cushing's likeness in Rogue One. Although why they've waited till now to debate this is beyond me. I was under the impression, Brian, that the estate were approached at the time and everything was given the thumbs
Yeah.
up.
So I did a deep dive into it this week on fathertracks.com. If you hit the link in the show notes, because so much of the press reporting this week was so wildly wrong. It was embarrassing, and like one credible outlet gets it badly wrong, and everybody just falls in line and repeats. Um,
There's no research. Yeah.
this court case has been going on since 2019, so sort of 3 years after Rogue One came out. Um, and it's only really got into the headlines now is because it's finally reached the High Court in England after numerous cases and appeals. Basically, you've got 5 defendants in the case. You've got the Broughtons, who were the husband and wife who were effectively this running the estate for Peter Cushing, two of Peter Cushing's friends, and one of them was an employee. Sadly, both have deceased since the case started because they were in their 80s, similar age to Peter. You've got his agent. You've got Lunac Heavy Industries, who was the production company set up for Rogue One. You've got Lucasfilm, and you had a 6th defendant, which was the Walt Disney Company. They've been removed from the case. So really, the most recent incident that's gone to the High Court has been Lucasfilm and Lunac Heavy Industries trying to get the judge to just dismiss it without going to trial on the
Yeah.
basis that they had a signed agreement from 1976 from the original Star Wars film that they feel gave them rights to do what they did for Rogue One. And they also signed an agreement with the Broughtons in February 2016, ahead of the release of Rogue One, to give them rights as well to do what they did with the likeness of Peter Cushing. The argument from the Mr. Francis, who claims that he has the rights, complicated, but effectively he was making a TV movie with Peter Cushing. He was a very good friend of Peter Cushing. They'd worked on a number of movies together over time, and Peter Cushing had cancer at the time they were making that TV movie. There was a clause added to the contract which basically allowed them to complete the movie, the TV movie, if Peter Cushing passed away, using digital techniques. And it also mentioned that that if the movie wasn't completed, that none of what they'd provided in terms of the ability to complete a film with a digital likeness of Peter Cushing could be used for any production. Anyway, fast forward, complicated. The TV movie never got completed, and thus, according to Mr. Francis, who's bringing the case, that means that nobody can use the likeness of Peter Cushing, even with his estate's permission, without him also providing permission, because he's got a clause basically that says he has a ability to say no. So the estate could give permission, then it's supposed to go to Mr. Francis, and he can say yes or no. He's got the ability to deny, basically. The whole argument, as I see it, would be when Peter Cushing signed this agreement to make this TV movie, was he intending that his likeness never be used on any production ever again? Or was he really just saying, well, if you've got my likeness to finish this movie, if I pass away and you end up not finishing the movie, I don't want you using it somewhere else. And I think that's where it kind of falls into. If that makes sense.
That's the most comprehensive telling of that tale I've heard. So that's interesting that it goes as far back as potentially 1976 to around the film.
So back then, obviously, Peter Cushing was of an older age, even back then. And so they added clauses as to, how they could use footage in future projects as well. And it's a very, I've on fantatracks.com, we've got the whole wording, so you can read it for yourself. But effectively, it's a very open, and the judge admits that it's a very open clause as to we can use your likeness, we can manipulate it, we can do what we want with it on other projects, effectively. And the argument would be, from that perspective, Star Wars, George Lucas, both very innovative people. So even though back in 1976 you weren't aware of what would be happening in 2016, you knew you were working with someone who was pushing the boundaries of what film can do. You're working on a production that was pushing the boundaries of what film can do. Yeah. Perhaps when you signed that contract back then, you had some idea as to what they may be able to do.
Well, even for that TV movie to be sort of talking about digital, changes that could be made in the future. I mean, Peter Cushing died quite some time ago, so digital techniques would have been very much limited.
93, they were making the movie. I think Peter Cushing died in 1994.
Yeah. And so digital stuff was only really it was in its infancy really around then, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think it was more a ways that if you pass away before we finish this movie, we're able to do things in order to allow us to finish the movie.
Yeah, we'll freeze it, and then we might wait sort of 10 years for technology to catch up and then release it with you digitally.
My whole argument would be, and with the utmost respect to Mr. Francis, because undoubtedly he was a friend to Peter Cushing. He did the Channel 4 documentary on Peter Cushing that came out in, I think, 1989. So they were very good friends. But my whole point would be that based on the clause that's in the contract, if Mr. Francis had finished his film and released it, there was no clause preventing any other company entering an agreement with the estate and using the likeness of Peter Cushing. So if Peter Cushing had intended to prevent anybody else using his likeness in a future production, signing what he signed doesn't achieve that, because it was all based on whether the TV movie got made or not. If the TV movie got made, then all the rights fall back to the estate. If the TV movie didn't get made, then the production company on the TV movie retained rights over everybody else's production. That doesn't make sense to me.
I suppose, though, what we're really talking about here, though, is regardless of whether it was the correct thing to do from the production point of view, ethically, is it something that we should do anyway? Princess Leia was added in at the end of Rogue One, and it worked to a certain extent. The technology is still not quite right. There's something, the eyes don't convey enough life, and the mouth seemed a bit off. But again, it was still nice to see that nod towards Carrie Fisher and the character of Princess Leia. The introduction of a de-aged Mark Hamill at the end of the second season of The Mandalorian was pretty much universally joyously received, wasn't it? You see all these clips of people watching it in, grown men in tears, watching it, thinking it was like the best bit of Star Wars ever. And for many people, it was redemption for the character after how he was treated in the sequel trilogy. different people have different views on that. Um, but that's with an actor that is still very much alive and with us, and we can get their permission to do that. So if Mark Hamill says, yeah, sure, do that, he's in a position to be able to say, yeah, that's great. When it comes down to an estate and their decision, and then if that decision is then taken as being for wider use than perhaps it was intended, that's when you're going to get problems like you got with Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
But from an ethical point of view, from actually sort of resurrecting these people, these actors in different roles, be it Star Wars or whatever, as a person that grew up on the original trilogy, and going back to what we were talking about earlier about the potential recasting of the three main characters and Darth Vader as well, of course, it's a fine line between trying to hold on to these people if the technology is there to do it, or recasting. I would probably lean more towards recasting as time goes by, because it must be absolutely so time consuming trying to put these people into the films and TV. I'm sure it's a lot quicker than it used to be, but still, it probably very much limits what you can do with that character. You could see the struggles they had with the Rise of Skywalker, with Carrie passing away. So that was an example. Carrie had long since passed away. She passed away before The Last Jedi came out, although she'd filmed all the scenes for that. But when we come to The Rise of Skywalker, they repurposed stuff that they didn't use in The Last Jedi and were somewhat restricted on what they could do. What's your thoughts? Would you rather see recasting, or are you happy to see these digital things?
I think if you've got permission of the estate, you have to go with the presumption that estate know what that actor or that individual would have wanted, and the estate aren't just looking to make money from it. There's always going to be perhaps a dubious question over that. And really, I think now, if you're an actor in that industry, you need a clear instruction. So it's got to be part of your will, your instruction to who's going to be in charge of your estate, basically. I think also you need it to be contractually clear. If you're being scanned for a production, what happens to that scan when the production's finished? All these things need to be factored in, and I think California are starting to get on top of it a little bit. But obviously, Star Wars is really getting primarily made in the UK. We're not really bringing in any kind of legislation with regards to this. So you kind of need some kind of global industry standards brought in, because otherwise it's going to differ from country to country. It's going to depend where films are made, and it gets complicated. So if you're an actor, you might think, well, I know what my rights are, but you made the film in Ireland, and the rights in Ireland are different from everywhere else. So, I don't know. I can see why it makes sense in certain circumstances. I think for me, it's okay if you're doing it for something very minor. I think if you're trying to do it to create a fully fledged character in a movie, I think if you're doing it for one scene, because that actor's passed away and you need that actor in that scene in a future sequel, for example, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I think there needs to be better rules around it. There needs to be a proper industry approach to it. Going back to the Peter Cushing example, I think his instruction very unclear, based on if the film got made, the TV movie got made, then it was fair game for the estate to enter whatever agreement it was. If the TV movie didn't get made, why did Kevin Francis get all the rights? That doesn't make sense to me in the whole thing. And if you're Lucasfilm and you approach the estate and you get permission from the estate, you presume everything's okay because you're not aware that the estate has signed an agreement with another producer. That's impossible for you to know So from Lucasfilm's perspective, I don't think Lucasfilm have done anything wrong in this case. Reading the latest verdict to the judge, I think the judge is pretty clear that Lucasfilm are ultimately going to win this case. But based on the fact it's an issue of fact, it has to go to trial. It's not one that can have a summary judgment issued on it. So I think the fact that the case is continuing is kind of irrelevant. I think it's pretty much given that Lucasfilm are going to be perceived to be in the right, because they're covered in sort of two different grounds.
Do you think that there's a likelihood that, and it's probably already been constructed at this stage, do you think there's a likelihood of Tarkin turning up in Andor Season 2?
I think there is. I think there's a really good chance of that. And in terms of this case, the whole query is, did Lucasfilm unjustly enrich itself by using him? But they've paid a fee to the estate, so they've paid a cost in order to be allowed to use him. So it's really difficult to say they've unjustly benefited. The only thing holding them back from being in Andor Season 2 is obviously they've got this case ongoing. They would have to go back to the estate, get permission to use him in Andor, which would also require permission from Kevin Francis until it's very clear that permission isn't needed from him. So I don't know whether Lucasfilm would take that risk whilst an ongoing case is ongoing to bring Tarkin.
That's what I was thinking.
Into. Probably they won't, is what I'm thinking. And I think that's probably why you're bringing Orson Krennic back in, because he kind of can be that sort of middleman.
Yeah. It's a shame, because if they had intended to use the character and that this has stopped that from happening, that would be a shame.
Yeah,
I don't think
it would stop them. It would stop them, because I think the one thing you don't do is poke the bear during a trial. Really?
Absolutely. But yeah, I don't think that the addition of Grand Moff Tarkin would have had any impact on the success of Rogue One. It was purely a nice nod, to Peter Cushing, and a nice nod to the original trilogy for the fans. So we'll wait and see. You never know.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to follow, and it's a complicated one. And we spoke about it as well, about James Earl Jones and his voice being used in Obi-Wan. I think there's good ways the technology can be used to bring people back, and I think there's bad ways. And I think you can't leave it for individual productions to decide what's right, what's wrong. You need, whether that's contractually through the various unions, or you need some kind of global approach to the whole issue.
Definitely.
And ultimately, I think the actors need to be clear as to what their instruction is. Once they're gone, and there's no wiggle room moving away from that. If an actor says nope, it can never be used, that's it, final.
Yeah, it should ultimately come down to the permission, or the opposite of, down to the actual actor themselves. Absolutely.
I think that's it for this week's Jabba's Court. Jabba's Court's part of Good Morning Tatooine, part of our weekly recap of everything Star Wars every Sunday night at 9 p.m. in the UK, 4 p.m. in New York, and also released as an individual video on Factor Tracks TV every Wednesday at 7 p.m.